Hey, AusetGypsters, welcome back. Took a little break for 4th of July weekend last week, but we're hitting the road today. We're going to talk about how to read a horoscope. Alright, you ready? Settle in, and once I get out onto the open road, we'll start our segment. Well, AusetGypsters, we're finally out in the open road. And today, the segment, I want to show you, or I want to share with you, how to read a horoscope. No, not a birth chart. That would be a little difficult to diagram and explain while driving 85 miles an hour down 78 West. But how to read your horoscopes, as in magazines. I take it a lot of you look through the newspaper or your local fashion magazine or your international fashion magazine or some sort of publication, and besides the front page's editorial content, the horoscope is the next runner-up to what people look at when they look through a magazine. So it's an important job of the astrologer to provide a really good horoscope. But most people don't understand how to read their horoscopes in publications, magazines, newspapers, etc. It's more than just beginning with your sun sign. Now, we all know our sun sign. We all have a birth date, or a birth date we at least think we know of, and we use that to assess the time of the year that the sun was in, which would give us either an Aquarius, an Aries, a Capricorn, a Cancer, and so on. But what's equally as important is knowing your moon sign and your ascendant. Now for this, you might have to talk to an astrologer or a friend who's a little bit more savvy in astrology if you don't know what a moon sign is or what an ascendant is. Those three components right there can provide an astrologer with a pretty detailed reading straight from the get-go. You would have to create a birth chart, or you could look up ephemerises to find out very quickly where the moon, ascendant, and sun are. In the Western world, you know, hey baby, what's your sign? Kind of sun sign astrology is what's important. But that's most of the time because of the 1960s and what happened to astrology through that decade. But if you were in Italy, they're more impressed with what your moon sign is. That they believe that this is what shows your real, true nature in life. And then the ascendant's a little tricky to try to explain. You really have to think about it. It's the zodiac sign that's coming up on the horizon at the moment you're born. But every moment of the day there's a zodiac sign coming up on the horizon. But for our purposes today, we'll just stick with that. And those three things are what we're going to concern ourselves with right now with this segment. And it has a lot to do with looking at your horoscope in a magazine or a publication. Besides just reading the sun sign, if you know your moon sign, which in astrology and in a chart, your moon sign expresses our emotional needs, our feelings, not relationships. That belongs to Venus. But our feelings of what we feel about people, places, and things, our senses, our sensitivities. And the ascendant is our mask. It's kind of the first impression people get when they first meet us, or first see us, even more so. So if you have a Scorpio ascendant or a Capricorn ascendant, it might be hard for people to get a read on you. And those two signs are very, very armor-plated, so they like privacy. So naturally, off the get-go, you could be a sun sign Gemini, which is very extrovert and outgoing, but with a Capricorn ascendant or the Scorpio ascendant, you might send off a different kind of vibe to people when they first meet you. That's where astrology gets intricate and very interesting. So just those three signs alone, sun, moon, and ascendant, can really complete an entire horoscope. for a day, a month, a year, depending on what publication you're looking at. So when you open up the publication, don't just read your sun sign. Also read what your moon sign might be, and also read what your ascendant is. This is going to give a fuller, in-depth horoscope all around and all together. Now let me give you a little insight on how horoscopes are written for publications. A lot of people give gruff because they say, oh, this is kind of bland, and oh, this is sort of just across the board. And of course it is. The astrologer is writing for a mass group of people. And now, being born under specific sun signs, those people will share similar experiences, but it doesn't mean it's going to be exactly the same way. Everybody's different, and everybody's going through a different path in life. I know this because I've been writing horoscope columns for almost 10 years now, and it all depends on the editor, believe it or not. Some editors are zodiac savvy, which makes my job a lot easier, because then we have a good open dialogue. So when they read my content, they know how to edit it. You know, fix the grammar, but keep in the astrological content that's relevant. Now, should you get an editor that has no idea about astrology, a horoscope is going to suffer slightly because they're not going to understand all the astrological jargon, and more than likely going to skip over that, edit that out, and just stick with the advice, and even water it down some because they might feel that the astrologer's original horoscope was either too harsh, confusing, or didn't meet the approvals or the standards or the theme of the issue of the publication. So there's a lot of things at stake there when an astrologer submits their horoscopes, filters through an editor, and then goes to print. So right then and there, sometimes that can cause the reason being why a horoscope in a publication can be so bland. So don't kill the astrologer. They're doing their job. It also depends on the astrologer, their personality, and what sort of horoscope they want to write. Now, going back to how to read the horoscopes in a publication, read your sun sign first, then the moon sign, and then the ascendant. This will give a full overall reading for who you are personally. But now remember, some people, you know, you could be a Sagittarius sun with a Pisces moon. Well, actually, no, that's impossible. But you could be a Sagittarius sun with a... Wait, just fill in the blank ascendant and moon. This is even challenging my wit and imagination as I'm driving down the highway. And to be honest, everyone's driving like an animal today, so I gotta keep one eye on the road, one eye on the camera. And so each person's gonna be different. So, you know, these horoscopes are gonna match up. Now you're gonna find some jewels and some savvy that really connect in there. Don't expect every horoscope prediction to absolutely come true, because, well, you're a mix-up of lots of different astrological spices, and not everybody is exactly the same. You know, you'll get some gruff from Virgo saying, yeah, I read my horoscope, it didn't apply to me at all. But did they read their moon sign, which did apply to them, or their ascendant, which gave them the advice they were really looking for? So that's the thing you really want to do. You really want to learn how to read your horoscope, and it will give you a fuller all-around picture of what the stars have in store for you on that day, that week, that month, that year, and so on. Now, it does get a little bit more tricky if you're on a cusp, which means if you are on a cusp of Aries and Pisces, and so on from there. Because then cusp people don't know which sign to read. And it really depends on what day the sun went into that sign for that year. Some days it goes in a little bit later, some days it goes in a little bit early. So if you're on the cusp of Aries and Taurus, and you're born on the 20th or the 21st, depending on the sun going into that sign right now, this year, the sun could have still been in Taurus, or Aries actually, which would make a person more lenient towards Aries. but you can still read the Taurus sun sign to get a fuller picture as well too. And, you know, when you get really technical about astrology and horoscopes, well, then what happens next is some signs border different houses. So this is when, if you're not exactly 100% astrological savvy, I know I keep using that word a lot, but it's the only one I can think of right now, then consult an astrologer. You can always email me, or a friend who knows a lot about astrology, and they can help you with this more. Now, the other thing I want to talk about with horoscopes is, as astrology filtered through the New Age movement, 70s, 80s, and 90s, somehow astrologers got misconstrued as being the messengers of absolute hope and what I find vapid, New Agey, positive advice. But on the contrary, this is not the astrologer's job. Now, you'll come across astrologers who are a lot more jovial and upbeat, and they may want to just talk about what would be positive, but that would be robbing the individual of knowing their strengths, weaknesses, blind spots, illnesses in their life. When we have an astrology chart in front of us, and we have so much information there, to just stick to the positive is doing a discredit and a disservice to the client. But again, if you've watched my other videos, you know how uptight I get about people taking responsibility for their position with divination. You have to own it. And it's important to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the whole Facts of Life theme song. It would be so wrong to just talk about positive. Now, I'm not saying we should be the total harbingers and messengers of doom, gloom, and everything that's absolutely horrible. But it shouldn't be that either, because then there are some astrologers that can go to the opposite end of the spectrum and use total fear to keep a client coming back. And that just comes down to personal ethics. I'm not here to judge anybody. I'm just here to give, you know, some insight to you, the viewer, on these topics. I'm sure you're an intelligent group and can see a charlatan a mile away and know how to stay away from them. But astrologers have somehow gotten this weird reputation for only being able to talk about the fluffy, positive things. And that's not necessarily the case. When a client sits with me, we cover everything. They need to know. That's what they came for. I'm not one for giving totally optimistic, fluffy advice. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm not compassionate. Of course, you have to deliver your advice with equal parts compassion, equal parts confidence, and equal parts, what's the word I'm looking for here? Diplomacy. You don't want to frighten somebody, but at the same time, you don't want to short them and not give them a full reading. So don't always expect astrologers to have to be the ones to give you the pat on the back and always have to be there to help you through a rough situation. A lot of people confuse astrologers and therapists, and this is where a fine line and definition needs to be made and drawn as well too. Sometimes a client is truly looking for a therapist, but comes to an astrologer because they're metaphysically inclined or New Age inclined, and unfortunately that's not going to be the complete answer. But hopefully an astrologer could lead that person to the proper therapy they require and help that person get better had they not wanted to do that route previously. So, in wrapping this up, now you know how to look at a horoscope a little bit better. Know your sun sign, know your moon sign, and know your ascendant. Read all three. And all three altogether will give you a complete overall of what the stars have in store for you. If you have more questions about astrology or horoscopes or how the zodiac works, please feel free to email me at AusetGypsy@gmail.com or visit my website, AusetGypsy.com, and I'd be more than happy to set up a consultation for you or answer a few questions via email or in the comment box below. Now I gotta get back to the road here because I feel like I'm in Death Race 3000 and Frankenstein and Jane are hot on my trail. So enjoy the rest of your weekend and peace. Bye.